the realization comes that there are so many decisions made outside of my room that impact my students that if I really want to advocate for them and for my profession, I have to have a place to be, an organization to be in. It's no secret the NEA does not support a single test measure being the primary criterion for measuring teacher success. There are a lot of reasons for that. The lack of research, for one. Being able to determine the impact of one teacher. Is it from last year's teacher, or is it what I'm doing? Not taking into account factors of absenteeism, turnover, and all of those things. But it's also from the point of view of the practitioner. My last year in the classroom, I taught 2 general math classes, 1 geometry, and 2 pre-calculus classes. 160 students. And at the end of the year, all 160, if they take a test, by which one am I measuring? There is another model out there for measuring the effectiveness of teachers, and that's the National Board of Professional Teaching Standards. It focuses on the practice of doing the profession. Over 20 years, they spent $200 million developing assessments about what a teacher ought to know and be able to do. And what you need to know in early childhood or high school math is not the same. Most times, in most circumstances, we go into the classroom, somebody comes in for 20 minutes a year and writes an evaluation. It's horrible that that's how we induct professionals into the profession. And then once we give them tenure or the right to due process, there is no professional development system. And you know, from magic wand, every bad principal teacher disappeared, you have not solved the problem. Because there is a whole system of recruitment, training, induction, evaluation that is not being done. And simply removing those who shouldn't be there does nothing to change the system. The system must be changed. It's wrong what's happening. The least prepared, the least experienced are being put into buildings of students with the greatest need. And we need to change that. We've interviewed 2,000 national board certified teachers in 6 states saying, what would it take for you to go there? What would it take for you to go there? We know that number 1, it's leadership. They will not go to a building with a bad principal. Number 2, they want to be part of a team that takes collective responsibility for the education of the students. They want different learning and working conditions. And yes, they want more money, but that's not the pre.
I haven't served on the National Academy of Science board that reviewed the National Board work. And while it is the case that teachers who choose to go through that process tend to be more effective teachers. They tend to be more effective teachers even before they go through the process. And we found no evidence of it improving practice.
What you're talking about is if I, as an individual, get National Board certification, I go back into a school or district and I kind of won by myself or a couple of us, I think you're right. Evidence shows that it doesn't really impact the overall system. But where evidence does show that it makes a tremendous impact is when they do it together within the school.
There's pretty good evidence that licensure and degree level, although we use them for policy purposes, really don't provide a good indicator of teacher quality as measured by their value-added contribution to student learning. Should we even be using student tests as a metric for teacher effectiveness? And this goes to a much larger issue that we face as a school system, because NCLB certainly uses student tests. Personally, I think there's very good evidence that both on an individual level, how well students do on these tests affects their later life outcomes, and on a national level, there's really good emerging evidence that it affects our competitiveness as a nation. I personally think that it is absolutely worth experimenting with using value-added modeling for making personnel decisions. That the reason it's worth thinking about that is because the other way that we might differentiate teachers is through a teacher evaluation system. And this was discussed earlier, that there's overwhelming evidence that we don't do that. And there are probably some political and cultural reasons that we don't do it, but basically, almost all teachers that come up for tenure get tenure. Almost all teachers, if you look at any rating system, fall into the top rating. So there are no consequences for having differentiation in terms of a teacher success. And when you have a system like that, you're not encouraging that kind of success. So the status quo is not setting a very high bar for, an alternative.